Very good. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Pima County Board of Adjustment number 1. And if you will, you can follow me along and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I have a small flag on my desk here, and I'm going to stand up and say it. So, if you would, please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the Secretary please read the roll call?
Chair Wildwood.
Lauren, we're having a tough time hearing you.
Is this better?
No, not really.
Is this better?
No, but try it one more time.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay. Chair Wildwood?
Present.
Carol?
Okay, Mr. Chair, before we get started, what I want to do is we're having a tough time hearing because there's background noise. And so I think what I could accept done in the past is that everyone is on mute except a couple people, and we're hearing background noise. So if everyone would just say their name right now, then we'll know who's unmuted and we can address it specifically and try to get that person unmuted. So if everyone would say their name, I'll only hear the people who are unmuted.
Benson.
Okay, so someone named Benson is not muted, and so if you could look down at your phone and mute, that looks like where we're getting a lot of the background noise. Okay, Lauren, let's try that again.
All right. Chair Wildwood.
Present.
Carol. George Carroll.
Present.
Bruce Call.
Present.
Richard Green.
Present.
Kelly Maslin.
Present.
Mr. Chair, let the record show that everyone's in attendance today.
Very good. Would you read the first case description? We have 2 cases today, one of which is fairly small and the other which is fairly big. So I would like to read the first case, please, the Miller.
For P21VA0020 Miller, North Tortolita Estates Drive, the applicant's attorney actually requested for a continuance to the next meeting, and they're on the phone if you wanted to address that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can just confirm. So this first case, we've just recently received a continuance request. So the board should act on that continuance request, before proceeding with any other hearing.
This is Bruce Call. I move to accept the continuance request for case number P21VA00020 Miller.
Richard Green, second.
Mr. Chair, if I can just comment here, Lauren, was there a date-specific continuance request?
It just says until the next available meeting.
And so, Mr. Chair, that hearing would be January 3rd at 1 p.m. So if Mr. Call, I'm assuming that's when the continuance would be for.
Yes, in my motion, I worded it that we would accept their continuance request. So let me clarify, since their continuance request calls for the next meeting, that makes it for January 3rd, as you've indicated.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded for a continuance to January 3rd. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Wildblood?
Approve.
Carroll?
Approve.
Hall?
Approve.
Green?
Approve.
Maslin?
Approve.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded and voted on to continue until the January 3rd meeting. May I have the next case description, please?
Mr. Chair, this is Tom Drzgowski. I'm going to read into the record, and then I can go over what's occurred. This is case P21 VA 00010, Catalina Foothills Church, East Orange Grove Road. Catalina Foothills Church, PCA, represented by Signs on property located at 2150 East Orange Grove Road in the CR1 zone, request the following variances: to increase the freestanding sign area to 50 square feet. Number 2, to increase the freestanding sign height to 10 feet from 8 feet, to increase the wall sign area to 114.71 square feet. If you'd like, I'll go right into my updated staff report.
Please, go.
Mr. Chair, I presented my revised memo dated December 3rd to the board, posted on the website. I'm going to kind of just speak freely, covering most of the items in there. Since the case was first started, staff, the applicant's representative, and a group of neighbors have met a few different times. I've worked closely with both the applicant and affected stakeholders. Some progress has been made. I don't want to speak for either side, but reductions in height, hours of the signs being illuminated have been made, and I think there's some agreement on some of the items, but not all. So what staff has done, the applicant made a new submittal request. Generally, staff is supportive of most of the items, and we're recommending approval with conditions. And so staff's outlined 7 conditions that we would recommend be included if the board is inclined to approve the request. Some of this is based on interaction with neighbors and through our meetings with the applicant and stakeholders. 1, all signs shall be located as shown on the site plan attached to the memo that I drafted. 2, design of the signs shall match submitted material. 3, freestanding sign along Sunrise Drive shall be a maximum of 7 feet tall. The freestanding sign along Orange Grove shall be a maximum of 8 feet tall, and both signs shall have a maximum area of 30 square feet. Number 4, only letters, address, and logos shall emit light on the freestanding signage. Number 5, freestanding signs shall be turned off no later than 10 p.m. Number 6, wall signs shall have a maximum letter height of 21 inches. And number 7, wall signs shall be turned off no later than 9 p.m. The recommendation that I made in the condition attempts to mitigate the maximum amount of items that may adversely impact neighbors. One of the items that has not been really agreed upon between the church and the neighboring group is the lighting and the color temperature. The proposed signage will match other types of signs in the area. Many of the signs near this location have the backlit halo illuminated signs. That includes La Encantada and the other corners at the complex just to the east at Campbell and Skyline. It's important to note that the outdoor lighting code requirements will apply to this signage. The proposed signs will be required to meet those, and staff does not believe that additional restrictions should be put in place other than the outdoor lighting code. One of the things that staff's done and the applicant is I think okay with is that what they're doing is turning off the signs earlier than what would be allowed by the outdoor lighting code. So So that's one of the areas that may assist in mitigating neighbor impact. The scope of the request is really to increase one of the freestanding signs by 1 foot and the other sign by 2 feet, and to allow slightly additional square footage on the building signs. As to offset that, the building signs will be required to be shut off by 9 p.m. and the freestanding signs would have to be shut off by 10. That's an hour and 2 hours earlier than what the outdoor lighting code allows, which is 11 o'clock. Last thing I would note is that if the variance is approved, there are a couple of other signs that are not in compliance. This includes the banner signs that are periodically installed on metal poles out front. These do not appear to be in compliance. That pretty much concludes my staff report. I can answer any questions you may have.
Is there any questions from the board of staff on this?
This is Bruce Call. I have a question, clarification. On the approval with conditions, item 3, it says the freestanding sign along Sunrise shall have a maximum of 7 feet tall, and on Orange Grove, 8 feet tall. Both signs shall have a maximum area of 30 feet. Is that 30 square feet each sign, or is that both signs together sum up to be 30 square feet?
Mr. Chair, board members, that's the square footage per sign, which is in compliance. That square footage is what's allowed by code.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members to staff at this time?
This is Kelly Maslin. I'm new to this committee, and I don't know how many meetings you've had before this, but I'm wondering why, as a church, that they want their signs to be lit. I don't know if they have services at night or if there's another reason. I was just curious about that.
Mr. Chair, board members, the church will be able to respond to that. I can provide some overarching kind of comments on it. Church signs, the outdoor lighting code does allow signs to be illuminated. In this area, they're allowed to be illuminated till 11 p.m. I know the church, in my discussions with them, do have nighttime activities, but from my interaction with them, I think they're comfortable with the proposed reduced times. The main wall signs to be extinguished at 9 o'clock, which are higher up, would be seen from the largest amount of area. Those we're proposing to be extinguished at 9, and then the freestanding signs at 10. Now, one of the things to mention, and this was part of the discussion with the applicant that I've had, if they just dismiss or withdraw the variance, they'll be able to still meet the code requirements and illuminate their signs till 11 o'clock, which the outdoor lighting code allows. So I think the church can respond as to what their activities are, why it's illuminated why they need illumination. But signs are allowed, and the church would be allowed to keep them illuminated.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carroll, do you have any questions? Well, on behalf of
Mr. Chairman, this is Richard Green. I have one question just to make sure I understand correctly, because in the narrative of the request, it says that CR1 zoning limits the property to one 30-square-foot freestanding sign. But is that per frontage, or is that for the total property?
Mr. Chair, board members, that's per street frontage, which is consistent with how our old code was written.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to get clear on that. Thank you.
I would like to comment right now, this Chairman Wildblood, I'd like to comment right now on behalf of the board. I would like to thank staff for working so diligently over these many months to try and get this taken care of. And it's obvious to me that approximately 85% of all of this request is working fine. And they're very, very close to being, without question, not even needing to have a meeting of this type on this. And Tom, maybe you can correct me on that. This is so close to not meeting a variance that this looks pretty good, actually. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, board members, I think some of it was maybe when the original submittal was done, it was a little bit, some of the information might not have been 100% accurate submitted by the applicant, but I think the church and the pastor has made compromises to reduce sizes, the timing of the signs being illuminated. Those are some of the requests that are, definitely, in staff's opinion, would reduce adverse impact to neighbors. When we talk about square footages and heights, there are slight increases that are being requested, but there's also offsets and conditions, I think, that would protect neighbors, reduce the timing that the signs are illuminated. And so those are all the things the board will need to consider as they, hear testimony from the applicant and affected stakeholders.
Very good. All right, at this point in time, then, if there's no further questions of staff from the board members, I would like to, does anybody else have any more questions of the staff?
Mr. Chair, if I can make one comment, because I think it might help just with some of the things here. I think two of the areas that you'll hear, and this is just for the board members to kind of, this is what I think we'll be hearing from stakeholders and the applicant. One of the things two of the items that were not agreed upon was the size of the letters on the building. The applicant is proposing 24-inch letters. I believe the neighbor group was looking for something more in the 19-inch letter height. Staff is proposing 21. We think that's large enough to be seen and provides enough. The applicant, you'll probably hear, wants 24. Neighbors want less. The other area that I think you're going to hear about is color, temperature, and the lighting elements of the sign. So those are just, I think, in staff's opinion, the two things that you're going to hear as we move through the hearing.
Very good. Thank you. All right. At that, with this stage, I'd like to hear from the applicant. Would the applicant please be sworn in, please, and present your case?
This is Mike with Addis Sign Company. Go ahead.
Mike, if you just give your name and give the name and address of the company for the record, and then you can proceed.
Okay, it's Mike Addis, 3808 East 38th Street, Tucson, Arizona 85713. So thank you, staff, and thank you to the board. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you. I'm going to try to make this succinct, and I'm going to speak from the number one issue that is the problem with the reason for the variance, and that is for identification for the church in order to properly identify where the entrance is and properly put the name of the church both out on Skyline and also on Orange Grove. I trust that each of the members over this lengthy period of time have had the opportunity to go to the site and visit the site and drive the site and realize what has transpired with the lack of identification at this location. The signage that is located on Skyline and the signage located on Orange Grove will help to identify where the entrance is, along with the building signage that is on the west elevation of the building. So the church has been there for a while. The church basically was established prior to the increase of the road that is the new developed skyline. And as you can see, the sign that was originally put in is fairly small, comparatively speaking, and in conjunction with the travel lane of skyline, as it was increased, it has made it very difficult for the church to be seen. The church recently has received a new pastor about 3 years ago, and they've been expanding some of their programs, including the youth program and some of their other outreach programs of which the pastor can speak about. And they've been running some problems with identification of individuals that are coming to the church. And that's been part of the prompting of the reason for the identification of the signage. I'm hearing some background noise, and it sounds like somebody...
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if we could have everybody look down and mute their phones again, that'd be helpful. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So that brings us to this point where we're wanting to add the identification and work closely with code. Now, there's probably 3 items that we're dealing with. One is the increase of the size of the height of the sign on Skyline, and also the height of the sign on Orange Grove, and then the increase of the square footage for the building sign that we're asking for 47.5. Code allows for 30. The building sign would be compliant with what's called halo illumination, which meets the requirements of the dark sky. And so that sign would be a soft identification, not through the face for the lighting of the letters. The additional square footage would be for the sign that's on the east side of the building. It is a non-lighted sign that is over the entry. So basically, those are the 3 areas that we're requesting. Height on Skyline, height on Orange Grove, increase building square footage to the 47.5. And again, I'm going to identify that this has been over a period of several months and over a period of several meetings, approximately 4 months, and over 6 meetings with the groups together in order to arrive at the point that you have before you. You have the package with the revision. I trust you've been able to walk through it, so if there are any questions, I'll answer those and then turn it back to the chair.
Do any of the board members have questions of Mr. Addis at this time?
This is Bruce Call. I have a question. Mike, can you identify why the size of the sign on the building needs to be larger? Is that related to the distance the building is from the street? Are there other elements that make that an important determination?
Yes. The main identification reason, or the main reason for the larger letters, is the distance from the intersection. There is a letter visibility chart that is displayed, and the letters need to be a certain height in order to be seen. You can see the dimensions that are listed on page 11 of the package. It's approximately 300 feet to the intersection. And obviously, you would like to have that identification at least 200 feet in advance of that, so you know where to turn and you can anticipate seeing the sign that is on the building.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that because of that's actually the controlling element. Why have a sign if it's not visible or at least readable? And so you're saying that is the controlling element for this request of variance is the distance, and that's a pre-existing condition, not necessarily a hardship imposed by the owner.
That is correct, and obviously the building sits down in a hole. The building is angled so that it is not able to be seen from both directions. And so the anticipated visual impact for the sign literally starts, I'm going to say, at that 500-foot mark, and therefore the request for the 24-inch letters is what we have on that drawing.
Okay. Does speed limit come into consideration at all in that calculation?
Yes, it does. There are many factors that come into consideration. And so, again, putting the letters that are on the building with the halo illumination is not as easy to read as it is with letters that are through the face. That is a consideration. The fact that the building is so far off of skyline is definitely a consideration, and the fact that it is only seen largely in part from one direction is another consideration. The speed of the road takes into play the visual impact as well. So yes, you are correct. All those factors lead to the size of the letters, of which we would like those letters to be read easily, and reducing them in size does not contribute to making them read easily.
So then is it reasonable to say then, based on what you've just identified, that the neighbors, at least as far as the building on the sign on the building is concerned, the neighbors will be very minimally or even not impacted because none of them can, well, it looks like there's one right there on Orange Grove that might be able to see it from an angle, but the rest would not even be able to see it.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do any other board members have questions of Mr. Addis?
This is Kelly Maslin. I'm just wondering, I know you said, but what is the purpose of lighting the sign to 9 p.m.?
Theoretically, the church would like the signs to light until 10 p.m. And the reason is because they have youth programs that run, and often the youth program most of the youth programs do not run past 10 p.m. So if you have parents that are picking up individuals, students, and they're picking them up at the end of the program, and then the church is completely dark, it somewhat defeats the purpose. The outdoor lighting code was written in order to accommodate both business, and it should accommodate churches as well at 11 p.m., and this is why the church is willing to go to 10 p.m. when the programs shut down, because, again, they don't run anything past 10.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, this is Mr. Wildblood. The church has also got their parking lot lit up. And I understand through that the Tucson police that in the past there's been a lot of nefarious activities that have been in that dark parking lot. Are they going to be changing those lighting structures there at all? Or do you know?
I can probably, Mr. Wildblood, I could let the pastor speak to this, and also, Kelly, I could let the pastor speak to some of the questions that you're asking about the programs that the church runs. He can better explain what they've done with the parking lot and the lighting of the parking lot and the various activities that they've been trying to stop that have taken place in the parking lot.
This is Pastor John Stone. Would you like me to speak to that, Mike or Tom?
Yes. State your name and your address, please.
This is John Stone. I'm located at the church, and I never remember the church address. Let me look it up real quick. We are located at 2150 East Orange Grove Road, Tucson, Arizona, 85718. Part of the reason we're asking for the illumination of the signs until the times we agreed upon, and especially upon the Orange Grove Road, is that you actually cannot see our entrance because the foothills don't have street lights. Because our pavement is exact same color as the road, a good number of our older members have missed and sort of run up in the desert trying to turn in. There's no lighting whatsoever. It is true that our parking lots have been lit, and we have lighted the lower parking lot, and I'll address that. But the main reason for lighting them is it illumines in a very small way, but makes clear this is where you turn. And since we removed our non-compliant signs on Orange Grove, people have not known where to turn in. We did add parking lot signs to our lower parking lot. Our upper parking lot has always had lights in them.
John, please hang on.
Yeah.
That
sure.
phone that's ringing in the background, that person must mute your phone, please. Mute your phone. Okay, John, continue, please.
Hey, thank you. We always had our upper parking lot lighted, and those lights were on a timer. We put in new lights compliant with, and they were approved by the same board. We are having to retrofit them with a timer so that the majority of them will go off at the appropriate time with the code. They face down, they do all of that. But our lower parking lot has had an occasion for, and you'll forgive me for being blunt, a good number of illicit relationships going on, and also some folks are selling drugs there, and some younger folks were going there to use drugs, primarily pot and others. It's very hidden. We have done some work to open up the desert around it, but the lights have eliminated that activity from our parking lot and from that part of the neighborhood. So the reason we're asking for it to be lit is because people cannot get into our parking lot without it, and we need something to mark where you enter, because we've grown from about 350 to about 650 people. And when people pull in, even in the day, they're not sure where to turn because there's nothing on Orange Grove that says this is Catalina Foothills Church. So that's why we're asking it to be lit to the times that we negotiated. And we do have lower parking lots, which will go on and off both lower and upper parking lot, which will go on and off at the same time. When I use the term lower and upper, I mean the large parking lot on our west side along Orange Grove, not the parking lot on the east side along Miraval.
Okay, thank you for that comment. All right, at this point in time,
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a technical question to Mr. Addis?
Is that Mr. Green? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm curious, and Mike, we talked about this, how reliable is your acrylic vinyl combination in terms of your B? Do you to predict how bright the sign is going to be? Can you make a prediction or scale your internal LED strings or something like that?
So let me see if I understand what your question is. And this is George. Is that correct?
It's Richard Green.
Oh, Richard Green. I'm sorry. I didn't hear. Richard, your question is relating to how bright the sign is in conjunction with the vinyl or the acrylic faces. Is that correct?
Right. I know it's hard for you to predict in an internally illuminated sign how bright it's going to be, but can you in some way?
Well, I think, and let me address this. I'll address it by two aspects. One is the outdoor lighting code, which is what governs signs, limits the lighting to 4400 K, which is a temperature that is used for the LEDs. Number two, the lighting that we have on the building is what we call halo illumination, which is a reflective light, not a direct light. On the freestanding signs, the background is not illuminated, only the letters. And again, I would ask if you've seen the present sign that is out there right now, which even though it has a teal background, the background is entirely illuminated, which is the freestanding sign on the corner of Orange Grove and Skyline, closer to Skyline. That sign, even though it is a little bit bigger than what we're proposing, is very difficult to see. And part of it is because the entire sign lights, of course, the letters are quite small. The sign is set back. So I don't know if that answers your question or if that does not answer it, Richard.
Mike, could you identify the lumen output?
The lumen output is not necessarily the identifier, and it's not what is measured for signs, unless it is an electronic message center, and then the lumen output is measured in the form of nits for the light output on an electronic message center. But the temperature is what is regulated for the LED.
Isn't temperature just color?
Temperature is color, and also
I can have an 8-watt LED that's a 3500 K temperature, and so it's a nice warm light, but it's not putting out very much light.
So temperature is also a measurement of the frequency, and so the amount of light is not necessarily is not measured under signs. And again, Tom, do you want to speak to that issue?
Well, I mean, I think there's two different things here. I think in regards to color temperature, the 4400K is regulated in the outdoor lighting code. How the intensity of light is regulated, that's something that the board can and should discuss and determine if any limits should be put on there.
The reason I posed the question, this is Bruce Call again, the reason I posed the question is there are some lights, and maybe it's from an electronic message board, but there are some lights where the light is so intense and bright, even though it's over a fairly small area, it's uncomfortable light levels. And then if it is, I think that's what Mr. Green was trying to identify too, whereas if the light levels are more in a more comfortable range, the color is not so much the issue as if you get a really overly bright, intense light, even from individual letters, it can be uncomfortable to the driver.
So, in answer to your question, that is correct. Most of the intense light that becomes uncomfortable is in the temperature range that is not regulated by the outdoor lighting code. Just as there is with fluorescent lighting, when it goes into a sign cabinet, LEDs also have a number of LEDs that are positioned based on manufacturer recommendation, just like you put fluorescent lights inside a cabinet that are 1 foot on centers. The same thing happened with the LEDs. I think what you're talking about is regulating the amount of light from a lumen standpoint, and it's different with LED message centers because what you're looking at is actually the light itself, where inside a cabinet there is a filtered light with the face and the vinyl material that is different from the direct light that you would see from an LED.
I understand.
LED message centers.
So then, in response, most LEDs you can get that are also dimmable. So would it be reasonable if that's determined to be just too intense and bright? Is it reasonable to have a dimmable condition on those lights?
And are you referring to the ones that are on the building or the monument sign, or both?
Mostly the monument sign. The building, because it's a halo lighting, it's dramatically reduced, even if you were to crank it up a lot. But on the monument signs, that's where the potential could be, and therefore maybe putting a dimmer on those would allow for some comfort level adjustment, since we don't have specific numbers that we can bank on at this point.
I don't exactly know how that dimmer would be put on there and whether the LEDs that we are using are actually dimmable. And part of the reason that I say that is because we don't dim our LEDs, if that makes sense. These are used specifically for signs, and so that gets into an area that I'm not completely familiar with as far as, I know some of them can be dimmed, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that's an area that we don't normally work with.
When you're dealing with an electronic message board, those are also all LEDs. They don't have a lens in front of them per se, but they're all LEDs, and those are generally dimmable. And so that as you begin to compete with the sun, the level is LED light output level, the lumen level is very high. As the sun goes down, then the lights are actually dimmed so that they aren't uncomfortably bright when there's no competition with the sun. And I was thinking that something similar might be appropriate in these monuments, freestanding signs.
Mr. Chair, this is Tom. Mr. Call, can I ask you a question? So your concern is with the Catalina Foothills Church that's on the freestanding signs?
Correct.
Maybe what I'll do while the hearing's proceeding is I'll talk to the building official and see if I can get anything that might assist with that.
Thank you.
Because I think I heard you say this, the signs on the building are backlit, so the letters are actually not going to emit light, right? They're going to be illuminated from behind, and it's the shadow that we see. So with the freestanding sign, maybe I'll talk to the building official as the public testimony continues.
Let me, Tom, before you complete your discussion and go to the building official, the clarity of the individual lighted letters on the freestanding signs is actually quite a bit easier to read than the ones that are halo lighted. There are a number of instances around town that I've specifically observed. And so, but I've also, in that process, I've noticed that some individually lighted letters can be intensely bright, uncomfortably so, and that's been the concern that I'm voicing.
Understand, on the freestanding.
On the freestanding only, yes.
Because the light is going to pass through the Catalina Foothills Church letters, and it may be uncomfortable to people who are driving by.
That's correct.
Where the halo one's on the building, the light's going to provide the shadow, which is what you really see.
Yes. And
Understand.
So on the individual letters, they can be intensely bright, whereas, like you say, on the building, the halo effect dramatically reduces the comfort concern.
Sure. I will work on that a little bit while the rest of the hearing's proceeding.
All right.
Thank you.
That said, we don't want to get into too much minutia here, but I'd like to ask at this point in time, are there any other questions of Mr. Addis from the board? Being none, I'd like to ask, is there anybody in the audience here to speak in favor of this variance? Being none at this stage, I'm going to ask for people that are opposed to the variance to speak. However, what I want to do is you are going to be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. And when there start to be repeating, we will turn off these comments and we'll continue with the board meeting. So make your statements brief. Please introduce yourself. Take yourself off of mute. Introduce yourself one at a time, and let's proceed from there. So the first person to speak against it, and we will have a number. Let's open this up for those people to speak against this variance.
Chairman Wildblood.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Fred Fiastro. Can you hear me adequately?
I can. Go ahead, Fred.
I'm speaking on a landline, but there has been some echoing and this and that. So if you have any trouble along the way, please interrupt me.
Fred, it's Tom. Real quick, we'll start over here. Let's just make sure everyone is illuminated because I'm hearing some background noise still. So everyone, just make sure they're on mute. Okay, yes. Go ahead and proceed.
There was somebody had a phone call there recently, and it sounds like they're typing on their computer. That person must mute themselves, please. Okay, Fred, go ahead. You're on the clock for 3 minutes.
Okay, well, my name is Fred Fiastro. I'm at 6580 North Altos Tercero, and that's in Catalina Foothills 9, just north of the church, north side of Skyline. And Mr. Chairman, I'm a member of what we're calling the Sign Variance Working Group, which represents over 100 neighbors who have responded in writing and 6 organized homeowners associations in the area. And we've worked for 4 months on this matter, and I believe my comments and those of my colleagues together will last about 10 minutes. We respectfully ask for the opportunity for our group to respond with a full presentation, and we realize that other folks are on the line and would like an opportunity to speak. We were only advised of the updated application on Friday, and we were prepared to speak in November, but with these recent revisions, we had to retool our responses. So if you would grant us a few more minutes for the 3 members of our representative group, that would be helpful. Can you do that for me?
You're a minute and a half into your side. get to your point. And
all right.
If you have...
Well, our discussion is going to focus on and collating the multiple communications that we have received and reflected in the comments that are available to you. At the top of the list, the question is, what hardship justifies these variances? And as you're aware, there are 12 standards that must be considered by the board when considering a variance request. And we have really heard no substantive hardship responses to these 12 standards in the many months of discussion on these matters. Our group has also analyzed size and topography, and can see nothing about these requested sign locations that indicate a problem with visibility if the code limits are met. Alternatively, if we were looking to accommodate the church's desire for larger signs, we suggest requiring specific compliance with what we know to be the Dark Sky Incentive Program. Now, this is a novel idea in this hearing today, and we'd like a few minutes to be able to explain what that is, because we think it has implications beyond this case and indeed throughout the county. Adopted in November of 2020, this program allows for a 25% increase in size, height, and area if 4 dark sky requirements are met. They include, number 1, only sign text is illuminated, which is going to be the case in this request. Number 2, lamp color doesn't exceed 3,000 Kelvin, a maximal luminosity intensity of 100 nit. We strongly dispute the notion that this light would be inappropriate. We've consulted with dark sky experts in Tucson, and they strongly concur that meeting these limits on brightness and light temperature would result in adequate visibility. Indeed, the framers of the current sign code would not have included these parameters in the sign code unless they believed that they were workable. The fourth factor in the requirement for the dark sky incentive is a 9 p.m. curfew. If these 4 elements were met in this case, number 1, the monument signs could remain the same size as requested, 30 square feet. Number 2, the monument height could be increased to 7.5 feet from a 6-foot limit that's required by the current sign code. Number 3, the wall sign could be increased to 19 inches in height with a 24-foot length with a resultant 37.5 square foot total area. And we would like to point out that the square footage of the wall sign that's being requested doesn't include an existing 13 square foot sign on the east side of the building. That is also something that has not yet been discussed in this hearing, and we'd like a few minutes to discuss that, because that has to be considered in a total global limit of 30 square feet for any wall signage on this site with the zoning that they have. Number 4, industry standards suggest that a visibility of the sign on the wall would be a distance of 475 feet if it's built to the specifications we're recommending, which is well beyond the Skyline and Orange Grove intersection, which is only 300 feet away, as Mr. Addis said. Another point is that the wall sign will indeed be visible from Cat 9, my neighborhood, and residents who live up the hill north of the church building. In addition, there has been some comments about the light on the property, and it may not be known that there's plenty of light on the property. There's been a recent complaint filed that there's 2 to 3 times the lumen limit being emitted from the property at this time. Now, and the lumen wouldn't be included normally in the lumen limit on the property, but the parking lot signs certainly would be. And so we really strongly believe that achieving that 100 nit output, which is required by the dark sky incentive, and the 3,000 Kelvin temperature would be quite feasible. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been written into the code. And we've also learned that dimming, as Mr. Green has asked about, is quite feasible. We've learned that also from local dark sky experts. So finally, we respectfully ask the question, why would we think about granting height and size variances without compliance with this novel dark sky incentive program? Wasn't this the purpose of these recently adopted policies? The result of significant effort on the part of county officials, multiple community stakeholders, including lighting and sign experts and multiple astronomy experts. We respectfully ask the board to Number one, what reasonable hardships exist to warrant variances on sign height and size without compliance with these dark sky incentives. We asked for the monument signs to be no higher than 7.5 feet. We asked for the wall sign to be no longer than 24 feet with a 19-inch letter height and a square footage of 37.5 feet. And we asked for a 9 p.m. curfew across the board for lighting on all signs with a light brightness no more than 100 nit and a light temperature no more than 3,000 Kelvin. And again, finally, there are these repeated violations of the requirements for banner signs.
Mr. Chair, it's Tom. I mean, we're at about 6 or 7 minutes, I think. So just
okay.
I was about to ask Fred to sum it up, so we can talk to some other people.
Yes, I am.
You have 20 seconds to sum.
I would just like to thank you for your kind attention. I would like for you to please, with your permission, allow our group member Bill Reed and attorney Frank Bangs to make comments in sequence with me for a more cohesive presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, the next next person to speak against this variance would be who?
This is Bill Reed. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes max.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Reed. I live at 2328 Miraval Segundo. I'm president of Catalina Foothills Estate Number 8, and our neighborhood is directly south of the church. Camino Miraval is the access street into our neighborhood from Skyline. One of our concerns is the actual freestanding monument sign on Skyline itself. Part of the 2001 agreement between the church and Cat 8 was to restrict the traffic from turning into the Cat 8 neighborhood. Encouraging drivers to turn on Camino Miraval would violate the intent of that agreement. A sign along Skyline would do just that. It would direct traffic onto Camino Miraval. The variance application states that the monument sign will help drivers navigate and prepare to turn into the church. That's acknowledging the intent of the sign. There's very limited parking access from Camino Miraval. Any drivers that turn onto Miraval would have to navigate through our neighborhood in order to access the Orange Grove parking lot. That increased traffic would create a safety hazard for our residents. Camino Miraval is a narrow residential street with no sidewalks, vegetation growing up to the pavement edge, and many residents walk on that street every day. Because there is no property entrance along Skyline, only the Orange Grove entrance should have an entrance sign. Furthermore, that Skyline sign would be a duplication of the same wall sign that they're proposing to put on the northwest face of the church, which would create an unnecessary cluster of signs along this designated scenic route. And now I'd like to respond to some of the suggestions about the prostitution. First, the prostitution and the drug deals in that parking lot that supposedly justifies the extra lighting.
That has nothing to do with this variance. So your 3 minutes are up, sir, and I'd like to get the next person up, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is Frank Bangs. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Frank.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Frank Bangs. My address is 2575 East Avenida de Posada. I'm the vice president of our Neighborhood Association Board of Directors and also a member of the working group, as Fred Fiastro indicated. Chairman Wildblood and members Call and Carroll may recall that Catherine Jacobson and I have appeared before you 4 times in the past. We did so not just for our benefit, but because we were we saw that the variances in those cases were, in many cases, much larger than the code, and were inconsistent with the size of existing signs in the Inez Skyline Sunrise Corridor. And in addition, these variances were all not supported by any justifications which would allow the board to make its legally required findings for a variance. This application today has those same problems, but it raises another important issue. And as Fred has mentioned to you, it ignores the comprehensive revision of the county sign regulations adopted only 1 year ago, which could have solved these signage problems without any of those options that Fred described to you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to take, though, a moment just to clarify a point. For the first time in these proceedings, the applicant's representative, Mike Addis, has said that the purpose of the wall sign area variance is to include an existing sign. Fine. If that's the case, you need to have an accurate number from them that includes the area of that sign plus the wall sign that's, whether it's the one size recommended by staff or some other, before you for purposes of your motion. Otherwise, we're just all going to end up, swimming in a cloud of misunderstanding. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. Thank you very much. I have a letter in the file. I hope you have a chance to look at it. And thank you for your volunteering to be on this board and for listening to our comments.
But thank you, Frank. Is there any other people that would like to speak against this variance? Apparently nobody is there. Frank, I'd like to ask you, you've attended these various meetings that have come across, have you not?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
How many meetings have